So good morning and welcome. It's just such a privilege to teach you what I have learned and we have learned about starting a culture impact team. And so we will go through a course that's going to be 8 hours. And the first hour here, why start a culture impact team? And first of all, I'd like to introduce you to the organization that established Culture Impact Teams. It's called FRC, and it stands for Family Research Council. Family Research Council was, in part, the idea came from Dr. James Dobson, who felt that we needed to have some kind of a voice in Washington to express the faith values on behalf of Christians across the country. And there are two different, I'm going to back up because there are two different portions to the FRC organization. One is called the Family Research Council, the other is called FRC Action. And I'm going to also show you on a state level the organizations that correspond, because FRC started family policy councils in many states. We have one here in Colorado called Colorado Family Action, and there's a second counterpart of Family Action called CFA Foundation. And so the reason for that, I'm going to show you what the IRS defines as an organization that can relate to pastors and can be in churches, and one that can relate to the politicians, and there's a difference in fundraising between the two. So this is a picture of the webpage for the frc.org, and if you'll notice as I go to the next one, it says frcaction.org. And then we'll go over some of the pages with resources. This is their cultureimpact.org, a page that I hope you'll become familiar with. But here's an excerpt from the IRS regulations that says that a 501c3 organization in yellow may not be an action organization. And they consider action as it may not attempt to influence legislation as a substantial part of its activities, and may not participate in any campaign activity for or against political candidates. So when you see the action portion, that is more or less an informational organization that can raise nonprofit funding, but it cannot endorse or oppose a candidate. Then, if we look at the 501c4, that organization is called a social welfare organization, and it is exempt through taxes on its fundraising also, but it does lobbying, but does not jeopardize that status by doing lobbying. In other words, they can try and influence legislators. And so they cannot either substantially intervene in political campaigns, but they can influence. So at any rate, just a little word to inform you that as you get out and you're working with organizations, there are some restrictions imposed by the IRS on what they can and cannot do, and that applies to churches as well. So I have for you some videos, and they explain in just amazing detail why a person might want to start an organization like this or be involved, like you guys already know I'm preaching to the choir about why be involved in politics, so to speak. So this one is by FRC.
Were these men of God throughout history being too political? 1450 BC, Moses petitioned Pharaoh for the liberty of God's people, even calling down consequences when the king failed to comply. 870 BC, Elijah, in the name of the Lord, he challenged King Ahab and his advisors for their ungodly policies and practices. 29 AD, should John the Baptist have kept quiet rather than confronting King Herod about his immoral lifestyle, even though it cost him his ministry and even his life? 30 AD, when Pilate said to Jesus, "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Was Jesus too political when he replied, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above"? refused to comply with the governing authorities who told them not to preach or teach in the name of Jesus. 54 AD, the Apostle Paul preached the gospel in Ephesus in such a way that it totally disrupted both business and politics in the region. 1775, in early America, would you have joined Pastor Jonas Clark in Lexington, Massachusetts, when he led his church and community to form a militia and face the British in the War for Independence? 1830.
Be holy as God is holy.
How political was Second Great Awakening preacher Charles Finney when he passionately called for an end to slavery from the pulpit? 1954, was separation of church and state being honored when Dr. George McPherson Doherty preached a sermon that convinced President Eisenhower to include "under God" in our Pledge of Allegiance? 1963.
I have a dream.
What about the civil disobedience of Baptist minister, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who led civil rights marches, giving his life for the cause? Were all these men of God being too political, or were they just being biblical?
There are some issues that are moral issues and biblical issues, and we have every right to speak on them. What's happened is the politicians have taken some of these moral issues and they've made them political issues. And so they're trying to threaten pastors, they're threatening churches that you cannot get involved in politics. You can lose your tax exempt status. This isn't politics, this is a moral issue. And we should never concede an inch on this issue. And if the government wants to take on a moral issue that's contrary to what our Lord taught, then we as pastors need to stand up and we need to be very vocal.
In many ways, I think the role of the church today has been defined by the secular world. They say, now you guys, we don't want you doing this, you stay over here. And so we have so narrowed the influence of the church down to a little bitty 2-foot square box right behind the pulpit. And we even tell the preacher what he can say when he's in that 2-foot square. Now don't get out of that box. We don't want you to influence education or law or government or culture or media. You stay in that box. And by the way, while you're there, here's the things you can't talk about while you're there. That's a new thing in America's history. It's a new thing in biblical history. All the way through the scriptures, God's ministers always spoke loud and clear in every arena.
America is a nation in danger of judgment. And the backdrop is that there's a culture that is rapidly apostatizing, turning away from God, calling evil good and good evil. And we are living in that day. And so it is crucial as ministers, as pastors, that we be aware of the signs of the times and that we respond accordingly. This is not a time to be silent. It's not a time to be timid. It's not a time to be intimidated. This is the time to be stronger than ever, to rise up. These are the same days in the backdrop that Elijah lived in, that Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah lived in, and the apostles lived in. So ultimately, this is a time not for fear, but it's a time for greatness, but we have to rise to that calling. So the call is, be strong. And whatever you have to do in your life, get it right. Whatever you have to rule out of your life, do it now. Don't wait. And trust the Lord and be bold, uncompromised, and stand. And God will anoint you for such a time as this.
The purpose of the Watchman Pastors Network is to create a fellowship for pastors who are standing for truth in their communities, so that pastors who experience the growing hostility of a culture that has rejected God's truth will know that they do not stand alone. Our mission is to champion the pastors of America for the transformation of America. And you should know this, that we at the Family Research Council have made the commitment that wherever a pastor standing for righteousness is attacked or challenged, that pastor will not stand alone. I give you my word, Watchman pastors will stand with you. So I invite you to join this rapidly expanding band of brothers. Become a Watchman pastor. In the words of the Apostle Paul from Ephesians 6, when you've prayed, prepared, and when you've taken your stand, by all means, keep standing. And know this, the Watchman Pastors Network will be standing with you.
Isn't that awesome? and talk about a first-class presentation. And there are so many of those that we're going to go over. And I've put together a list that is one of the handouts for you. And it is the video resources for the Culture Impact teams. And I've also asked that that be emailed to you so that you can click the links and access the videos that are within that document, or you can copy and paste them into an email if you'd like to share them with someone. Yes.
DVD different?
The DVD that you've received contains what we just watched, that Watchman pastor's message. And these are amazing resources to be able to share with your pastor, because as you go back, likely you're not going to be the pastor. You're going to be an influencer in your congregation. And here's something I want you to remember. There's actually a few things I'd like you to remember, because I've sat in your seats. 2 years ago, I was in that class. That was the first one of the government classes. And while you're a student, there is a student mentality that you adopt. You're told to sit down, be quiet, listen, and you have certain responsibilities and duties that you have to perform and get your curriculum, your hours, your practicum, and all that. And many times you could leave here and still feel like you are kind of subservient, like you need to change that mindset. When you go out of here, you are a leader. You have God's Spirit in you. You are there to impact the culture, and you are there to impact and influence your pastor, but there are ways that you can go about this that are going to be productive and received, and then there are ways that would not be well received. So if you set about to go tell your pastor how to do it, and you tell him what he ought to do, I think there's going to be some pushback. So you want to bring him resources such as this video and other resources that will inspire him to consider taking these kinds of actions. And then you can assure him of several things. One of them is that the role of a culture impact team is not to add responsibilities to the pastor's plate. Your role will be to take things off his plate, things he doesn't feel like he has the time to attend to, or he can't start a new project. Then you need to assure him that the people who are going to want to be involved in this are already there in the pews, and they are already passionate about these things. You're going to see some things that are going to stir you up to passion if you weren't already, and it will stir him up to passion. So he doesn't have a huge job that you're laying on him. He just simply has to give a voice to some of these issues, to allow people to become engaged and involved and to change the culture in your area. So to help inspire you along those lines, here is Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin, and he was being interviewed, and watch as this unfolds. It's a 10-minute interview. So it should start. And so I'm going to back out of this for a moment. Do you have a magic touch, Jim? It's the it's a blank screen, and it's the second one. So if you double click on this screen, it'll usually bring it up, and then we can expand it.
It's not showing on the TV screen now. There's enrollment. It's thinking.
Yeah, it's loading. So we were in the first class of the government school, so we were the guinea pigs. Now you're going to be the guinea pigs for how we do this presentation. So it looks like it's just going to take a little too long on the thinking process. What do you think? So there is another way we can access this. Okay, I'm going to let it close, and I'm going to bring up the program again, and I believe we can start. So let me go to my syllabus. Okay. So some of the things that you're going to be doing in your Culture Impact team, well, let me ask you, without passing the mic for this, just speak out anything that you think a Culture Impact team could do within a church.
Inform people on the legislation at the Capitol, the risky legislation that's coming against the church.
You know, you can inform people about legislation and get them to go to the Capitol, testify on legislation such as happened last week. We have had confirmed what we heard about the response. It was a record-breaking response last week to the House bill that is being proposed to not, in my opinion, it's not educating children, it's indoctrinating children into the LGBT lifestyle in a way that would be considered by any other era or any other court to be pornographic. It is just ungodly. So let's find our presentation. So we're going to see if it's still working. It is up again, and so I'm going to try one more time here, and we'll talk while this is thinking, and if that one doesn't come up, we have another, but it looks like it might be getting there. Okay, now let's try it again. Okay, and then, whoops, shouldn't have done that. Okay, so voter registration, that's something that's vital. The number of Christians that have not voted in elections.
Pause it, second.
Hi, my name is Evan Davies, and
You want to just go to full screen,
Well,
or do you want to go to the slideshow view?
yeah, go to slideshow view if
Okay,
you
and
can.
it'd be under view. It
It's
doesn't
just
like
we
that.
don't have it up there.
It doesn't like that. I think,
So-
oh, you don't have it up there?
Yeah, so you're
Okay,
gonna have to
so
drag it
let's
over.
try
Here.
view, okay, you go ahead.
The other thing
Do the double click on here again if you wanted to start.
The other thing we should be able to do.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. Let's go
Okay.
right here. And just do this for the moment, and we can just flick through.
Yeah.
That's-
There you go.
And then the full screen.
It's unavailable.
Yeah, while it's, after it's done thinking. Okay, so I'll just continue while we're waiting. So, this is why we do trial runs. You are the trial run. And I'm being tried by fire. So, voter registration, distributing nonpartisan voter guides. Believe this or not, some of our people who were attempting to distribute nonpartisan voter guides, in other words, it has the Democratic response and the Republican, so it's not taking sides, were turned down by a mega church in the area.
hi, my name is Evan Davies, and I'm just an independent consultant. I'm not affiliated with any organization. I really admire the work that you're doing to help foster children, and you've said a number of times that, you know, the children's lives is most important. We had a murder a little while ago where 17 people, including many kids, were murdered in their schools. And how do you reconcile the children's lives are most important with the comments you've made to the media about it's naive and premature to talk about gun control, and that it's culture and not guns that is causing these horrible things?
I'll tell you exactly how to reconcile that. First of all, a month ago in Kentucky, we had this very similar situation. We had a very concerted effort to make sure that we removed the media circus from the healing process. So within 24 to 48 hours, you're probably not even aware, most people aren't, that I had a 15-year-old come into a school in Kentucky last month and shoot 16 children at point-blank range, 2 of whom died. A set of twins were both shot and taken to a level 1 trauma center. They lived. This is very real to me. I've sat with these families. You also probably are not aware of the fact that I buried my oldest child. Died under different circumstances, but went to school and didn't come home. She was 17 years old. I know exactly, not exactly, it's not possible to know exactly what another person's going through, but I know exactly what it feels like to bury your oldest child. I know what the impact is on a family. I don't come at this with a sense of sympathy, but empathy. The point that I've made that's been largely misconstrued, I'll reaffirm with you and tell you exactly why it comes from, where it comes from. This idea, just as solving this issue is able to be solved with a single law or rule or change, is naive and delusional. And so we shouldn't allow ourselves to entertain naive and delusional thoughts. It is part of a broader construct, just as this issue is. And the point that I made, that I'll reiterate, is that if we think that a part of what we are seeing is not a cultural problem, we're kidding ourselves. And the point that I've made is this: what has shifted in the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? It's not the percentage of guns that we find in homes. And you can give me a statistic that there's now more guns. Fair enough, I'll submit that that may be true. I'm not going to argue with you. But the reality is there's fewer homes that have guns in them than there were 50 years ago when children didn't walk into schools and shoot themselves and shoot each other. That's a fact. You can confirm that. But I'll tell you this. When I was a kid, kids brought guns to school. Kids brought guns on the school bus. Kids brought guns to school in their own vehicles. Kids didn't shoot each other with them. So some things have not changed. What has changed? We as a culture, as a society, and it's very germane to this topic as well, we don't value human life like we did. We remove increasingly respect for the dignity of other people. You look at how rampant pornography is, the degradation and disrespect for women and for human life in general. It is so systemic. People of our age have not been exposed like our children have been. There's not a child in America that hasn't been exposed to pornography, I guarantee you, if they're above the age of 12. That's a fact. It is so systemic, it's horrific. And it desensitizes us at every turn. And so we're desensitized to the value and dignity of human life. We're desensitized through, and this is to the heart of what I said that you seem to take exception with, is that through violent video games, where literally you are encouraged. You can roll your eyes all you want, man, but I will say this. You've explained to me the value of a game that encourages somebody to go back and finish them off, where you get points for kill counts and you slaughter people. We're desensitizing people to the value of life. And we see it through the lyrics and music, and we see it through television shows, we see it through movies. We see it in the fact that the mores of this nation have changed. We see it through the fact that we increasingly want to remove any sense of moral authority from everything. I'll tell you again, we could have 1,000 sidebars, and you could agree or disagree as it relates to what I'm about to say. But in a nation where over the last 40 years, we've aborted 50-something million children, and we have multiple states with medically assisted suicide being provided by doctors. At both ends of the life spectrum, we're losing the value for life that we once historically had. You can say that's good, you can say it's bad, but it's a reality. You couple that with the fact that all these other things are changing, that we're removing any sense of authority. It used to be that you had different levels of authority starting in the home itself. Only a third of children in a recent Pew study say that they have no interaction, for all intents and purposes, with their own parents. When their parents live in the home, they say their parents have no clue what they're even learning in school. There was a study recently in an article that was derived from that and other studies. It was in the Atlantic. I encourage you to look it up, about the impact. And again, you can smirk and you can smile, but as somebody who's an independent consultant, I find it remarkable that you're so smug and you're so disregarding of my opinion. when in fact I'm just trying to have an honest dialogue with you, based on a fair question. But I will say this. Look at this article in the Atlantic. This article in the Atlantic talks about how young people are increasingly becoming suicidal and depressed because of the use of social media and the use of these personal devices and on-screen time. All these are part of a cultural issue. And this cultural issue, if we're not addressing it, we are kidding ourselves, because it also affects this issue we came here to talk about today, which is why these homes are broken, why so many children are finding themselves in government care, which is not the best solution. The government should not be raising our children, period. It just shouldn't. The fact of the matter is, we need people in the position like I am. And I had this same conversation less than an hour ago with the President of the United States. And I said to him, this whole room was full of cabinet secretaries and governors of other states. Those of us that are in a position of influence and the ability to say something, shame on us if we don't step up and call people to a higher authority. And there will always be those, including many in the media, whoever the messenger is, they're going to find the imperfection in that messenger. So if the messenger says we should do X, Y, Z as it relates to this issue or adoption and foster care, people will say, well, who is this person? They're an imperfect person. Well, so is every one of us. There's not a perfect person in America, but that doesn't mean we don't strive for perfection. There's not a perfectly morally upright person in America. That doesn't mean we don't espouse and aspire to reach for moral higher authority and expect more and demand more of our children. Shame on us if we don't sound the alarm. We want to take any kind of morality and change the mores of a nation, remove any sense of higher responsibility, try to pin it on any one thing and assume that government and a piece of regulation and rule is the solution, and then we're shocked when these things happen. We're kidding ourselves.
Wow, isn't that powerful? Hey, Jim, can you help drag the screen back for me? So, I must caution you that I would anticipate that the person who was interviewing him was probably a friendly interviewer. I think that many, like CNN or someone, would not let a person go on with their so-called ramblings in the opinion of the interviewer. But in this case, he had some things going for him. He is the governor. He has had to bury his oldest child. He does speak with a position of authority, thank you, and with a position of great experience. And I thought he just capsulized so well how our culture has changed that has produced the problems that we have that we can't solve by laws. So here we are speaking to the culture, and we can use other independent third parties to do the speaking for us. You know, when we get up and try and speak about those issues, people may not receive us as well, and we may not be as gifted at or credentialed at speaking. So we just use other people. And here is one more that I want you to hear. How many of you watch Truth and Liberty?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So it is awesome, and we love and we think that your director here, your coordinator, Richard, is like the star of the show with the research he does, the comments he makes. So it doesn't want to. We will pull this up probably in a subsequent hour, and when we've got our videos doing what we want them to. So we have passed out to each of you this Culture Impact Team Resource Manual, they call it. And in that is everything you would need to know about starting a Culture Impact Team. So it's going to be way too lengthy for you to really get through now, but we just wanted you to have that as a resource. And it is provided to you without charge. Normally it's a $15 manual provided by the Family Research Council. So think well of them, and when you have the occasion, use them, promote them, and thank them. So that was the bulk of what we were trying to do. So maybe we do have time, and I'm going to get out of this program so I can go direct to a video. We have that page that I spoke to you about, the video resources, and then just like I had told you you'd be able to do, I'm gonna pull it up and we're gonna click on a link that's in there. And so I've got a browse, let's see. Okay, I've got it in my Culture Impact Teams folder. There we are. Okay, and it is called the volunteer form. I think I called it, what's the title that's on your handout? I think it might be titled as the CFAN volunteer, CFAN CIT.
Church for All Nations, Culture, Impact,
Okay, CIT
volunteer
form. Okay, so we're gonna open that. All right, and when you open it on your computer, then, that's not the form. So, we want the video resource form. And we'll go back to browse for that.
Culture Impact Team Video Resources.
Okay. Okay, now there's a brief description of the various videos, many of which we're going to cover during our 8 hours. And so the one that says America's Culture to Allow School Shootings, we just watched that, and if we had clicked on the link, I think it would have worked better. And the other one that is Congressman Bob McEwen. This was the full hour, and notice I've got time codes 4934 to 5230. So I'm going to see if we can do, there we go, the control click hopefully is going to bring that up direct from YouTube. And then I'm going to go to
So if you want to know who to vote for.
4934. Okay, we'll start it there.
For ourselves, we're helping the rest of the world. Why did that happen? Because Congress was
You still have it on the
now,
wrong screen.
if we elect a Congress that wants to
Okay.
destroy him, then all that will come to us. Stop. And how do we know who to vote for? Well, people understand the parties. One party wants to see him succeed, the other wants to see him fail. And well, I need something more than just the party. Okay, let's do this. Why was America formed? In its birth certificate, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those are life. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. There is the preamble that says the purpose of the United States government is to preserve innocent life. Now, don't tell me it's above your pay grade, or I'm the county commissioner, or I'm on the school board, it doesn't matter. No, no. The purpose of government in America is to preserve innocent life, then liberty. Life, then liberty. Notice liberty is a precious little value if you're dead. You have to have life first, then liberty, then sewer systems and other masses. Who should I vote for? Ask them why. How do they feel about taking innocent life? Now, God protects life. If I want to take life, I first have to get rid of God. So that's why they don't want. Why say? Why do they care if they have a cross on the city seal in San Jose? Why do they care if they honor God in the Pledge of Allegiance? Why do they care about this? They want to separate us from God. There's a term for that, by the way. It's called sin. Sin is anything that separates us from God. And sin, when it is conceived, bringeth forth death. The wages of sin is death. There is a way that seems righteous, there is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. What are the ways of death? Abortion, infanticide, euthanasia, right to die legislation, drug addiction, alcoholism, death, death, death. But I am come that you might have life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He that hath the Son hath life. And so this is a life and death struggle. So who should I go for? Ask him. How do you feel about protecting innocent life? Now, they might want to waffle on this, and I'll say, well, personally, I'm opposed to killing innocent life. But I wouldn't impose that on anybody else. Now, personally, I'm not in favor of shooting you. But I can't impose my idea, so I'm going to shoot. No. If you're going to go to office to allow this to happen, don't give us this stuff. Either you're for it or you're not. And a person who will not vote to protect innocent life, listen to this, Andrew. Any person who will vote to take innocent life will not hesitate to take your liberty. And so, if you want to know who to vote for a person who protects life and liberty. And if we elect a party that rejects God, is dedicated to taking innocent life, perverting marriage, if we elect those people, they can destroy the greatest nation on earth. And that is in the balance in this next election. It was in the balance in the last election, and God blessed us with our
it was the evangelicals that made the difference.
That was 3 minutes. If you noticed, he was lecturing Andrew on the Bible. Not that he was trying to lecture him, but that he has such authority with which he speaks, having his background as a congressman. And by the way, has he spoken to you in this year?
Not this year, last year.
He did speak to us in our first year as well. And I was just amazed at his eloquent descriptions in such a short time. And I have used that 3-minute excerpt when we want to tell people, how do you know who to vote for? Well, do they respect innocent life? If they don't, they'll not only take life, they'll take your liberties. And it's simple. It just makes it so easy. And people have said, that helps me so much to know. And for your pastor, for the people that you're going to influence, resources like this are invaluable. Yes, Nancy?
Where is he from?
He was from New Mexico, and I believe he served 6 terms, anyway, some long amount of terms in the U.S. House of Representatives from New Mexico. And when he came, he taught us a course on how to get elected. And he has it down. I mean, he had the figures, the percentages, and it was awesome. So, Jim, what is the secret here on dragging this back, or how do we get back to our original view?
So this is just off to this side. Just grab it.
Okay.
Drag it back this way.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now you're finding out what it's like to go out there and try and give a presentation. You better practice it a few times, I see. I think we're just going to not consider this recording as one to use. But it's valuable. We've learned a lot. So, we have, what is it, 5 minutes?
Yep.
Okay. This one is a 15-minute video, but I'm going to start it, and we will watch for as long as the... Okay, so this one doesn't like that either, and we'll go to our video resources, and on there is speaking to pastors, the 15-minute video here. Okay, and then we're going to have to drag this. What do you know, Jim, you're teaching me. I didn't drag it far enough.
My name is Jim Garlow, and I have the happy privilege of pastoring Skyline Church in San Diego. And let me pose a question to you right now. Why is it that we have churches in America that run 10,000, 15,000, 20, 25,000 in attendance? At the same time, we have Christian universities that, if you include their online students, that universities that are now over 100,000 students, Christian universities. We have Christian radio networks that are exploding. We have television Christian networks that number in the billions of dollars of value. And yet the country's going to hell.
Yeah.
How could that possibly be the case? And the answer, I think, is a fairly simple one. It's not rocket science. We have silent pews. And the reason the pews are silent is because the pulpit is silent.
Exactly.
And when did the pulpit become silent? July the 2nd, 1954, with the passage of what's called the Johnson Amendment, which has never been tested in a court of law. We bought into a cultural myth that pastors should not speak out on so-called political issues. Now, what I'm calling for is not political activism, and that's a good thing. Political activism, in fact, is a great thing. But that's too understimulating. That's too underchallenging. That's not exciting enough for me. What I'm calling for, and what I think you want, is biblical applicationalism. A fancy way of saying the Scripture speaks to every issue of life. There's no component of Scripture that the Bible doesn't speak to. There's no component of culture, rather, that the Bible doesn't speak to. That being the case, why would we want the Word of God to be able to be applied to every aspect of cultural life? Every candidate running for office, in debates and discussions, makes statements about policies. All of these policies, if they were properly understood, should be undergirded by biblical principles. Now, some pastors sit back and say, well, wait a minute. We're salvation only. We just preach Jesus only. Well, that sounds impressive enough, because who of us want to be against the theme of Jesus only? But what they fail to understand, they don't get from evangelism to the aspect of the kingdom. So when someone makes a comment like that, sounds so good, but not well thought through, I say, really? So let me get a picture on this. You mean you would not speak against slavery if you were pastoring in the 1830s or 1840s or really, you wouldn't? Oh, well, yes, I would. Well, okay, then you care about kingdom issues. That's not just Jesus only. Jesus only, you get people saved by salvation, but you help understand how that applies to cultural constructs. I happen to be a part of the Wesleyan denomination. Our denomination was the only denomination founded for the purpose of radical abolitionism. Our early churches were one day's journey apart to help smuggle the slaves out of the South into the North. Is that a part of kingdom living? Oh, absolutely it is. Or they say, well, I only preach Jesus. Oh, really? Are you telling me you wouldn't speak out against Jim Crow laws? You wouldn't speak out against blacks having to sit at the back of the bus or drink from a different water fountain? Or you wouldn't preach against human trafficking? Or you wouldn't speak against, for example, the poverty and talk about how poverty can be overcome? You wouldn't handle those issues? Oh, yes, well, I think I would. Okay. Then what you're saying is you're willing to participate in what we call biblical applicationalism. I was talking with a high visibility leader in the conservative movement, and he was making the case that preachers ought to just preach Jesus and Jesus only.
So I think the bell's about to ring. So we've seen a pastor, a 6-term U.S. congressman, and a state governor speaking about biblical application to our culture in ways that people could get it.
Exactly.
So don't feel like you're alone, like you have no ability to articulate. Let these people do it for you. See you next hour.